Okay, so we're gonna start the last session, and this one hopefully will end in a positive tone because we have been doing a lot of reflection and it has been doom and gloom so far. We invited some friends to provide some guidance in how to be more upbeat with what's going on. So we'll have them introduce themselves. Alan?
No, it's all about you.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Ali Yusuf. I'm trained as a PhD data scientist in healthcare, and then I spent 4 years at Stanford working on evaluation of AI tools in healthcare in hospital. I worked on portfolio of models, and I have seen how models go through the governance process, risk, and ethical review of it. And then I wanted to be more technical, where I advanced to working as a chief AI officer in a small startup last year, working to see how a whole solution goes through a pipeline and the challenges you face as a small startup. And then this year I graduated to a corporate job where it's more of, I'm really focusing on seeing problems in AI at scale. I think one of the challenges with machine learning is, specifically generative AI, when you work on models, is you need to build safeguards and you need to see the variation of it depending on the data. So if you are a small startup and you don't see a lot of customers, you don't see the wide breadth of challenges that you might encounter as well.
Marcus Detry, I'm with Top Tier Capital Partners. We're a venture fund up in San Francisco. I've known Leo here for about 25 years. Actually met him back when I was starting my career in investment banking and working in quantitative models, but fell in love with the entrepreneurship process later in my career and got involved with my first AI startup way back in 2012. So it was really amazing to kind of see the capabilities of the technology back then, although much more difficult to apply, but very exciting right now to see how many of those capabilities have been democratized. And from our seat, where we see founders from, we invest in other venture funds and we invest directly in companies. So from venture funds like Threshold, we're an investor, we see at the early stage the amount of company creation and the possibility of solving some really messy problems, but not just doing that in a very efficient way where it's requiring fewer people, less capital, to bring some of these technologies to a reality, which is opening up a world of opportunity, but also another world of challenges in terms of thinking about how do you actually create value in a business and return money for our investors, which tend to be things like endowments or foundations or pension plans where those are people who rely on that income. So for us, very much focused on how do we continue generating the returns so they continue investing in us and we continue investing across the ecosystem.
So I'm gonna start off with a question, and then Richie, you might want to ask a question too, but this is, for the most part, we call it the reverse Shark Tank, where you get to ask questions. So my question is, I think we were talking earlier about we're seeing a lot of changes. And what we'd like to hear are, what are some of those changes? Do you think that those are good or bad changes? Of course, the answer is it depends on the context. So when are the changes good? In what context? And when are these changes bad? And in what context?
Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, so when are those changes good? When are they bad? I'd say some of the changes that we're seeing, certainly the speed. We're seeing companies reach metrics like, 100 million ARR used to be kind of a golden metric and something that was basically putting you in the category of a potential public company, potential IPO. Companies are getting that in under a year now, and doing so with dozens of employees. So certainly the speed that we're seeing companies grow, the velocity of shipping product. I mean, it seems like every week Anthropic is pushing something out that is just very transformative in terms of the capabilities. So the speed is absolutely a big change in the ability to get things to market much more quickly. Trends that we're seeing, I think trends, younger founders, I think unlocking opportunities to solve problems previously that before it might have required, to some of the earlier discussion, just more capital than probably was going to be available, right? Like that capital needs to keep coming in based on, okay, we need to see progress, benchmark, confidence that, okay, what we're doing is working here and getting us closer to that goal so that we can create that value so that we're generating that value for our investors and they want to keep putting money in our next fund, that we can continue investing in these type of opportunities. So I think that's a big area on some of the more challenging sides. Honestly, one of the more difficult things is because it is so easy to get things out to market, because things are moving so fast, what is actually durable? Right? As other products get to market, maybe it's a better solution, maybe it's a competitive solution, and the value, the pricing is just not as sticky, and so you start competing more on cost. Certainly constraints around compute is a big thing right now. Being able to scale some of these platforms. You're seeing issues at Anthropic and being able to meet some of the demand. Google was talking about in their earnings report how they would have had an even larger quarter in terms of earnings if they would have had more capacity. They just can't meet the demand right now. And then with that, you've got the environmental issues, electricity demand from the data centers. And then to some of the earlier comments, yes, like workforce transition. I mean, this is the biggest, most disruptive shift in the history of humanity, which is a great opportunity, but it's easier for some people to take advantage of that because of the skills and capabilities that they have versus others. And so how do we help manage that transition and allow society to take care of all those benefits while not leaving a class of people behind to just suffer the consequences? It's, I don't know that there's a perfect answer out there right now, but I think the most important thing is to make sure we continue talking about this and make sure that it's top of mind and not just say, well, we don't have an answer, let's just move on. But use incredible communities of intellect like this to help collaborate and figure out what those solutions could be.
I think I would add that on the point of speed, I think initially a year ago, you would have seen Deloitte and in other reports, X companies, like everyone is, no one have achieved their readiness or maturity, but then like all of a sudden with the competition and the increase in access of models, managers are using AI, engineers are using AI, everyone at the step of the company is using AI. So it's undoubtedly have added efficiency to everyone's workflow and improved and led to increase. But the demand of what is expected has been also growing. And then the challenge becomes, who do you recruit to become part of your team? If AI is very efficient, what is the workforce going to look like? If code is generally like it's a kind of a clear mandate in many companies. If you do not consume X tokens, then you're under performance evaluation. So there is an incentive for people to keep using these AI tools to bring more efficiency and improvement and production, but it brings a bigger question of how quickly can we move fast to prepare the workforce to be able to adapt to the changes that are happening.
So at this point, I would like you, Leo, to also engage the conversation, because you sit at the intersection of MIT, the chemical environment, but also you're a medical doctor working at the ICU, and you have long experience like hosting or developing these sort of datathons or this conversation like the one we are having today. So I think on the response, how do you see things changing, or AI as a catalyst, and even more since the arrival of these foundation models that we are talking about are so powerful and are changing completely everything we know.
So I refer to AI as the Trojan horse that we have been waiting for. A lot of the legacy systems have really overstayed their invitation. They have been broken for the longest time. I was in a panel 2 weeks ago, and this is a World Congress of Anesthesiologists, and I said, journals are dead, they just don't see it yet. And I would reference that episode of Breaking Bad where Walter was trying to haggle with or argue with the cartel boss to spare the life of Hank, who is his brother-in-law, who's a DEA agent. And then Hank tells Walter, you're the smartest person I know, but you're too stupid to see that I'm already dead, that there is no other ending to this narrative. And that's happening with journals too. And I was surprised because the other panelist is the editor-in-chief of Intensive Care Medicine, which is one of the highest impact ICU journal. And I thought that he is very conservative. He said, I completely disagree with you. Journals were never alive. So something that's not never alive cannot be dead. So I was actually blown away by his response. But it's hard. Like
So why do we keep publishing then?
So I tell the students to stop focusing on papers because papers will not have any value. We're competing against reels on Instagram. We're competing against engines of misinformation and disinformation and malinformation. No one reads our papers. I keep saying, who are fucking reading our papers? No one. Like, you don't even read your own papers.
Yeah, I do.
But at the same time, you have to be careful. So what we had said is that the next generation should be double agents. And we've talked about this, where you need to be invited to the table. You need to act like you're clones of the kings and the queens. And the way to do that is to publish in the Lancet. And we did have a paper in the Lancet yesterday, one of the highest impact journal. But at the same time, you're plotting a coup of what could replace those journals. And we're looking at how KGB and CIA are actually training double agents. And we're seeing whether we can incorporate that in AI as a catalyst. So it's both exciting and scary. And what makes it exciting is truly being part of this type of conversations from around the world. So we were in Morocco. I was blown away by how perceptive and imaginative the students are. Same with Addis Ababa. So, and then we work with about, I would say, 500 students. That's probably an underestimation. And they're nonstop. They are building things. We tell them that you cannot just build things without validating them. But they work all hours of the day. WhatsApp is nonstop. They're not getting graded for this. So we think that this is, the time is right to reinvigorate. So those are the 3 R's: reflection, reimagination, reinvigoration. So we're dreamers, we're doers, but we're also dancers. For the first time, we see people enjoying research. We see people enjoying learning. The question is, this is happening at the fringes. How do we let these innovations trickle into the center? Because the center is tightly guarded by the gatekeepers. And this is where the double agent comes in. But I'd love to hear from people of what else can we be doing differently. So they say that you have to bend systems in every opportunity that you get. Yes.
You know, I was looking for the journals are dead comment. Not that I think journals are perfect, but I think an important part of peer review is just ensuring that there's a minimum standard that science is reputable, that it's replicable, that we can all trust what journals are publishing. What do you envision replacing that, if not the journal system?
Ooh, I could talk for days around this. So we actually launched a special collection, and we would love your contribution. And the idea here is, how do we reimagine what we publish? Because introduction, methods, results, discussion, that could be 100% AI generated. And if you're saying that, oh, I could tell what's AI generated from humans, you're deluding yourself. You can't anymore. And we also say that what we publish in our papers are tuxedo 3-piece suit science. And this is why we're not trusted. What we need to do is and people are saying, well, let's put on more layers so that there's reproducibility. Like, no, let's take off that vest, let's take off that suit. We need to see the soul of science. So what we're saying now is, what we should be sharing are the decisions that you made throughout the life cycle. Why did you choose this problem? Who did you talk to who agreed that this problem is worthwhile to tackle? What methodologies did you explore? What methodologies did not work? Can you explain to us why you chose this method over that method? Because we've been blasting away journals. We tell them, Why are you celebrating the effect size? Why are you celebrating the p-value, the AUC? Those numbers are tied to the conditions of the experiments at that point in time. There's no such thing as generalizability. There is perception of generalizability, but it doesn't exist. So maybe what we should be future-proofing is the decision-making at every step of the way. So to us, science should be more of storytelling. And we're having this discussions with medical educators. What should be the competency that we would train our medical students? Because AI can diagnose better. AI can provide treatment plans better. And then we also know that robots and advanced practice providers can perform procedures better. So, oh yes, like 30 years ago, if you said that anesthesia can only be given by doctors, and now 70% of anesthesia in the United States are given by nurse anesthetists. So, and then they don't have to go through medical school, and they become better because that's all they do. They're not involved in other complex decision making. So we said that maybe one of the competency is storytelling and systems for engineering. The problem is we don't know how to teach this. And I keep telling the students that do not look at your teachers to teach you how to use AI, because we're in the same footing here. Your professors did not grow up with AI, so don't expect them to know. But we're gonna figure this out together. But that requires a massive, I don't know, shake-up of what we do at the universities. I also said to, like, I had a meeting with one of the deans at MIT. I think elite universities are dead, they just don't know it yet. Unless you change, like, come on, you still see classrooms where there's a professor teaching a group of students who are scrolling on the internet, and they're complaining, oh, the students don't pay attention. That's because you're not worth paying attention to. Because what I learned from you, I could learn in 5 to 10 minutes with Nano Banana or TikTok. So again, we need to blow things up. And the young people get excited when I say this. I get canceled all the time. I could write a book. I could write chapters on the times that I've been canceled. But I would love to hear from people of like, so we're segueing now to the last part really, which is how do we keep the momentum going? What else could we be doing? It couldn't be a one-off event in Silicon Valley. This is not going to have any impact. So the last thing that I'm going to say is that if we have a Project 2025 to improve health outcomes, what might that be? If we have a Stephen Bannon or a Stephen Miller here, how would they identify all the weak points and attack them all at the same time so that you get to do what you want to do?
Because one of the things that I'm also curious about, which I guess in the theme of today's event is also kind of talking about storytelling. I'd love to hear the stories that like Marcus and Ella also have about how they've gotten involved in the health AI space or AI space in general, investments, and about the systems you've engineered and kind of paralleling that, bringing that back to healthcare and medicine. Like, imagine there's themes and analogical kind of shared traits or values or knowledge that you've obtained that you could apply. I wonder, you know, if you were to take a stab at that question, what would that look like from your perspectives and your shoes?
I think it's your turn to go first in this one.
Okay, I'll share two components. So first, I was always in healthcare, and it was so fixated that I know I want to make an impact in healthcare, and I wanted to be a physician. And so I spent time there, and I was kind of like, you know, puzzled in my PhD that I had to spend 6 months of my PhD cleaning the data. That to me was, I'm doing something wrong. My model is not working right. But long story short, my interest in AI started to be in the wealth and depth of the data. And it was always coming to me that I see the engineering models, I see the AI models being built in engineering context, and I'm trying to think from the same system design, can I apply that in healthcare? And consistently I will get it to fail, because I'm not accounting for the control factors that I can see that is not in the research environment I have been in. That kind of led me that I wanted to get more and more into, I want to bring the more of the responsible AI and ethical practices into industry, because I knew that academia beginning of the pipeline rather than waiting at the end. I also wanted to see how things apply at scale, and I feel there is a value in contributing there. But what I have learned in healthcare is that, or at least the experience of startups I have been seeing is you get an excited, you get an idea, you get very excited, you iterate on it, you want to scale it, you want to bring it out, you try to communicate with CMS, you try to communicate with hospitals. But if you look at the hardware side, semiconductors and robotics, they have a very different paradigm. For them, they are culture-driven patents. Investors have a culture-driven patents. If you think about it, the same investor, you might correct me, but the same investor in healthcare can invest in similar types in the same portfolio. In hardware, you find people in semiconductors have patents on hardware, and they have validation, they have customization, but they're also not slow, they're quick. So I think, from what I have been hearing, is there's a conversion where we need to learn from the successful model that happens in hardware, how things are scaling, how can we bring this into the context we're in, and at the same time, how can we be agile in our thinking. If something does not succeed, sure, how can we improve, but not expect to take years to produce something. So I think my learnings have been shaped by how models are developing quickly in tech environment, and why are we lagging behind in healthcare, and how can we improve our way of thinking in terms of adopting these tools.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, in our experiences in looking at healthcare deals, I mean, one, we've stayed away from a lot of those deals just because with the regulatory risk around that opportunity, it's just another layer that, we have difficulty getting comfort with. And so it's better just to stay away from that for us because, again, we're looking at fintech and cybersecurity and DevOps and consumer, and there's so many different verticals, and so nobody can be an expert in everything, and you gotta kind of pick and choose your battles, and that's one where the regulatory risk is like, boy, that's, we just admit we're not smart enough to get our hands around that and be able to assess it as an opportunity. That being said, I mean, we do some of the more consumer-oriented ones we have looked at. We invested in Talkspace, which was one where we got comfortable with. We also recently looked at an agentic solution for RCM, and I know that was one of the opportunities that came up, and it was interesting, and they're doing some really interesting things. I've got a brother-in-law who consults in that space, and so I understood kind of what a battle it is between United Healthcare and their 500 data scientists and everything that they're doing to make sure that they're managing, they're optimizing for their bottom line, and at the same time, okay, how do you arm the providers to have capabilities? And so they're bringing that stuff to the table, but ultimately, what made it hard for us was that there was some risk within the ecosystem just in terms of players in the industry and their willingness to kind of work together, or potentially launch a competing solution that would make this redundant. So again, as we think about how do we actually generate a return for the people who trust us with their money so that we can continue investing in these opportunities, like there's just times where it doesn't meet the bar because it just doesn't have that there's nothing differentiated enough where it's going to be able to create enough value to have that outsized outcome, because we know so many of these opportunities aren't going to work out. So the ones that do have to be big enough that we can generate our returns. But another example that I'd highlight, and just picking up kind of, there was, I might be butchering this here, but along the lines of building, kind of tying back what is something that can be socially beneficial, but also be a for-profit solution, right? And so there's a company that we invested in called Tala. And Tala does microfinance loans within emerging markets. They started in Kenya in the mobile money market. Really amazing founder. But if you think about the use case, there's not really any banking solution for these people. So within their mobile phone, everybody's got a mobile phone. They use AI to scan all these different data points, assess creditworthiness, and then can literally push, call it $100, $200 loan to somebody within a matter of minutes to their phone. So think about a seamstress who can take that money, and maybe she was only able to buy enough fabric to, sew one dress a week. She goes back, buys more. Now she's got enough. She can buy a sewing machine, more fabric. She's producing 10 dresses per week. So now she's increasing this. She's able to hire somebody on and basically build a business. And there's just countless examples of how that's enabled a bunch of people who don't have access to any type of banking to have the capability to borrow money, invest in themselves, and actually build a business and really elevate communities. So there's opportunities out there for sure to address those things. I think oftentimes, you know, and what I love about this community is like Silicon Valley can be an echo chamber at times, you know, and I think that's really a detriment because there's so many great opportunities that come out from like outside that echo chamber.
I've seen a venture capital model that's actually addressing in North Africa, like the sustainable goals, and it believed that, you know, in order for us to be able to solve the problems related to sustainability in terms of food security and other components, we need to fund models in there. And I think if we kind of like have clusters of different types of venture capital, of different types of investment, we need a diversity of ideas that come out from outside Silicon Valley, not only Silicon Valley, but we still need almost like, you know, like a global forum where how can we bring the knowledge we're learning? And then I think one point to what Leo was mentioning earlier is learning is changing, practice is changing, developing models is changing, but what we don't capture is how is AI participating in our discussions, how is AI influencing our thinking, and are we advancing with AI tools, or are we just becoming reliant on them? Because they are contributing to our knowledge and thinking. The iterations we have in brainstorming and in building a POC and moving quickly is much faster. But what is the lessons learned, and do we have a way of sharing that knowledge? I think this is a worthwhile, more a problem of research shifting from just reporting on a study to how, for example, our learning from an experiment is. That's more worthwhile for people who are reading the research.
I think we also need to question something quite fundamental when it comes to healthcare innovation. Oftentimes the assumption is, oh, healthcare innovation requires this ton load of evidence and it takes a long time to make things happen. So we really need patient investors and all of this, right? And as a healthcare founder, I've pitched a lot of times to investors in my seed stage funding, and before me there was this other AI founder maybe selling like a lovable like company hitting that 100 million ARR you mentioned within 1 year. And here, when you talk about healthcare innovation and the revenues, we are not there yet. I think rather than being like you mentioned, Silicon Valley is an echo chamber. Even healthcare innovation in some ways is an echo chamber. We believe that things will take time, long. We should actually question ourselves. Why does it take so long? Why do we really need to? Why do we think that our approach is the best approach? Why is that we're not growing as quickly as these AI tools? I mean, some of the challenges around editorials or like these journals going out is actually makes a lot of sense. I don't know how many students are actually reading journals today versus reading the crisp summary from an AI agent, right? And why is that bad? Why can't it be used in our regular research? And how about changing the timelines for it? How about challenging ourselves, like the way today, the amount of time we were given to come up with an idea and pitch was like really small, right? And how about we create challenges like that, even during education, training, because fundamentally the world is changing, and what we can't do is like sit back and say, oh, AI agents are not good enough for healthcare, or no, I don't think that's acceptable anyway. So I think maybe challenging ourselves in the first place allows us to think differently about it, and maybe that's the beginning of a change.
Did you ever read the book The Giver? Yeah, right. So there's a book in there where there's like a person in the community whose job it is to hold the memory of things and to share that memory with other people who haven't yet experienced it. Now, I think that's like maybe part of our role in this hybrid generation where we lived in a system that worked in a certain way and we're ushering in the changing system that's coming with us. Right? We did work with journals and work with sort of the old system, and we want people to move fast and to create new things. But there's also the responsibility to say, hey, like, you know, you might not have seen a patient die when the system didn't work. Right? But if you haven't been there in the middle of the night and seen that and felt that and gone home with that, it's very tempting to say like, well, let's just move as fast as possible. Because you don't see the other piece of it, right? So we have this sort of unique vantage point that we need to really be leveraging blowing things up and moving as fast as possible, we have to also like embody that giver person and say, well, but like if we do things too recklessly, real human beings suffer horribly and die. So what's the balance? How do we maintain the best parts of the system and don't explode everything? How do we move as fast as possible and as slow as necessary at the same time?
I think some of the comments earlier, you had a lot of great comments in your panel, and to me, you know, often thinking about the type of funding for the business is a critical one, right? And they, you know, continue to beat the dead horse in terms of what, you know, the types of things that we need to look at and do, but venture capital is just such a small segment of financing that is out there. And especially, I think what's most exciting about AI to me these days is not the role that it plays in venture capital, but the role it plays for people who want to start companies who either don't want to raise venture capital or for whatever reason don't have access to venture capital. So now being able to get a solution to market, and so doing those in ways like, maybe this is something that just needs more care, more time, more thoughtfulness, more control over that, but it can be brought to market now in a much more economical way that isn't forced, okay, go fast, like be the next breakout company that is on all the magazine covers and goes public and everybody's high-fiving each other. You know, there's different ways to support that. So I think that to me, whether, you know, you're an entrepreneur and maybe you don't want a co-founder, maybe you don't want to take, like, there's a lot of reasons not to want to take venture capital. But there's also opportunities now to build and pursue different opportunities because of the way these tools have been democratized. And to me, that's one of the big unlocks. So we can try things, we can experiment, we can take our time, we can iterate, we can continue figuring that out. And there's all types of different outcomes that can be categorized as success, not necessarily because they returned, you know, 10x your money that you invested in.
I really like the point of having embracing the perspective of a giver, and something I see that I feel have quite a lot of promise is actually how young kids in high school and in undergrad are coming up with very innovative ideas in terms of solving for problems, because they don't carry the burden and the bias we have from the systems we are in. So you put those students into groups and you ask them, and they come with blowing ideas of how they come around the problem and do their due diligence and explore different dimensions of a problem we have not seen. And so also trusting that younger generations might have insights we do not have, but how can we support them to be able to understand the deal of problems we're working with and be able to be innovators and solvers of the problem. I think being quite okay that we might not solve everything is important.
So I think on this question, you basically share a lot about your learning journey, right? What you've seen or what you're seeing now. And related to this that you just said, is we don't want kids as innovative or brilliant as they may be to reinvent the wheel, right? So is there any way or is there any field that you see so you can transfer, is there any pattern that you see has not been solved that AI, in your opinion, has the potential of addressing that is not being, whose knowledge is not being transferred? So is there any way to transfer your knowledge, your experience, patterns that I'm sure persist from, I don't know, 10 years ago to today that could be passed on to them so they don't have to reinvent the wheel, so we can have a continuous conversation between generations? Because I think that's one of the big problems. During lunch we were talking about the difference in how difficult it is for many youngsters to enter the job market now due to artificial intelligence. But again, it's part of a bigger cycle. So if you have any insights on how these cycles might be leveraged to improve the...
I mean, honestly, I feel like passing along my insights right now, like $20 per month on Claude, and you're getting pretty close. Like, it's a little bit terrifying how good it's getting in terms of like, I'm amazed sometimes just playing around. I spend about 7 to 8 hours a day right now on my job in Claude. That's how impactful it's been. But the insights are just incredible. So I think a lot of that knowledge is getting captured. You know, I think a lot about this concept of continual learning, right? Like, what are we doing for the next kind of tier of knowledge, and how are we feeding that? But in terms of giving that experience where, you know, normally there are only so many people that, you know, folks who've been through all the have all the scar tissue that I do, can pass along some of those lessons. Like, it's just been a capacity of like, how much time do I have? And now I feel like so much of that is democratized. I think, you know, there's obviously a lot of nuance that goes in with that. And so, you know, there's always additional layers and problems to solve. It's just, it seems like within tech what happens is we kind of solve a very broad issue, and maybe it's like the 80-20 rule. You know, you think about this with a lot of the legacy SaaS products, like people, like, yes, it's better than not having it, but nobody really loves these products, and then software gets cheaper to make, things get more specialized where they start getting more tailored, and now we're getting into agentic stuff that is really like effectively recreating and taking over a lot of tasks that human beings typically don't want to do. So I feel like, you know, we're always getting to this point where things are getting more specialized and more focused and better solutions, and we're trending that way, but it's up to us to really drive what is that direction that we want to go into, and allowing really talented people to kind of solve those problems and then supporting them on their way.
I actually had a question about the success rate of young people as like entering as founders to companies, because I can't forget this, but an SF Tech, a Tech Week that happens annually, I went on a VC walk on San Francisco Pier, and then like I was just joining the crew, and just feeling I would see a lot of people who have companies who are, I find a lot of them are students. And I went to another hackathon, and I felt that, you know, it has been 4 years since I have been in a hackathon. The moment I sit within a hackathon, everyone is coding on their own, and all of them are high school students or college students, and they're asking questions way smarter than all of us as old folks. So I felt like, do they have, like, they seem to have the ideas, quick iteration, but what they need is supplemental knowledge of how to navigate the funding, what is a good opportunity to get your checks versus not, what to wait on versus not, like that component of maturity. That's not something that we get taught in schools or in universities, and you can only kind of acquire it with life. And people who have succeeded with my limited knowledge of, you know, having their third startup or whatever that is accumulation of knowledge of what succeeded and what failed, and what networks you maintain and what networks you demolish or you go elsewhere. So I feel that is not captured anywhere.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you nailed it with one of your earlier comments. I mean, the shift in founders, like, it's absolutely going younger because, you know, we have this, at least I do, and it sounds like you do too, like, I have this idea of like how a company operates, right? In my head, and it's been baked there, and that's everything that I've been focusing on for my career. Somebody who doesn't have that, like, to, you know, Leo's effort here, I mean, disrupting this, re-architecting it, thinking radically about how can we how can we build an entirely different organization? That person's not going to be burdened with all of these, like, patterns that they've seen over time that kind of force them to think a different way. Like, we're trained to think like that. And so those younger founders don't have that. But the flip side is they also need that support. And so I think that's where, you know, if you're starting that, you've got a really ambitious project going on, picking the right people to be around you, and then making sure that they, as part of that, the expectation is you're going to have that support, and you need to help you through those difficult things, because I'm always amazed at, like, a 22-year-old who can run a company, because how do you pitch to investors? How do you sell to executives inside companies? How do you hire really talented people? How do you, you know, manage budgets and develop strategies? Like, no way could I have done any of that at 22. But, you know, they're getting enough support around them. They're obviously incredibly talented people who, most importantly, I think can learn quickly. So being a student, picking up that stuff, knowing your weaknesses, being humble and realizing I'm not good at this, I need to lean into this and figure it out. I think all those things are happening with some really, really special people these days.
I mean, sorry guys for monopolizing it, but how does that combine with, according to all the predictions, we are about to see the first companies valued in several billions of dollars run by a single person, aided by agents. How does that fit with the landscape now, or how is that going to transform the entire environment? Because now it's no longer going to be like companies as a team. It's going to be a reality. So how humble can you remain if you have $7 billion invested on you when you are 20?
I don't know. I would have loved to have gone through the experiment and found out at this point. You know, fortunately, I was still learning lessons, but I don't know. I mean, I think those opportunities. Yes, I do believe that somebody will create $1 billion company with one employee, but I think those are going to be few and far between. If it's the hard thing is that, you know, ultimately, if it's a really good opportunity, usually there's a lot of competition that comes in, and competition makes things more difficult. It's kind of, now you're competing on price and talent and all these other things that just tend to make life a little bit more challenging to reach that goal. But certainly, business models that are more defensible, maybe moving fast, establish something, maybe there's a data mode where, okay, we've got the data, we're aggregating that, we're able to move faster because of the data, and there's this flywheel effect, and nobody can really catch up. Models like that where it can happen, but it's going to be really fun to watch. I hope it happens. I love seeing anybody who can get into entrepreneurship and kind of control their own destiny. I think that's just a great thing for society. But then, the consequences too of a lot of money that there's a lot of people who don't handle it well, and I think there's been some people who've used it really productively and given back to humanity and done great things with it. And there's others that haven't. And so, it's just, I think it's important to just keep, again, to have those diverse perspectives, get out and be a part of society versus, sometimes people retreat to kind of, okay, here's this little world. I don't know what that's like. I can imagine, once you start doing that, though, it can be really difficult to you start to lose empathy for things that you just can't feel anymore. And that's where I get really concerned.
So maybe a quick thing or questions that's open to everyone is, what is collectively something we can all take away or be building towards, such that we can kind of like see a progression towards like something we learned from this gathering or from this weekend, and how do you envision us to continue the AI as a catalyst to kind of like be building the right foundation, whether from knowledge, whether from mentoring, whether from opportunities to support the right way of thinking about entrepreneurship. What do you think? What does everyone think about the action items we can take away? Everyone.
Well, I can definitely contribute in that I basically fit the demographic of like young founder that definitely did not know the existing landscape and went in with like the new tools and tried to build and try and like reimagine things. But what I've struggled with is actually not having that wisdom, and I don't think that you can fully get the wisdom from a chatbot. So going to experiences like here has been tremendous for me. And so I guess to your point, like a place, ability to receive mentorship and learn from people that are further along is really benefiting me. And I think that when I think about, there's people that are even younger than me that are doing even crazier things, and I guess I just worry for them and hope that they also receive that mentorship and make sure that they stay down a good path because of how fast things are moving. And when you're 20 years old and you don't really know the existing landscape, essentially having a space that we can help invest into people.
So I know that there are communities, founder communities, but are the young founders actually going to those activities? And I'm just afraid that it's all aura maxing and looks maxing when they go there and not really to learn. And it's all about branding. So can you redesign those gatherings so that, again, they come in leaving their hubris at the doorstep and acknowledging that they don't know what they don't know? How do you design that in those spaces? I'm looking at you, men.
Yeah. I think the spaces themselves have to be fully reimagined. They can't be the same sort of, invitation only, hard to access. I think you actually have to go to the places where the innovation is happening. And that might be, we throw out the word community a lot, right? But like, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? I played in a band in San
find people you connect with, and often I know a lot of founders who have kind of their own circles of founders, because that can be a lonely job too. You know, you've always got to put in this space for the team, the employees, the customers, the investors, blah blah blah. It's hard to find that environment where you can be vulnerable, and most of them find that when they're with other founders and quarterly dinners, those type of things, where, you know, I'm dealing with this issue with my board right now. Like, you know, do you guys ever run across this kind of stuff? And to me, that's the best type of learning, because it's like your peers who are in it, and they're giving you kind of raw, unbiased, and everybody is just there with the mission to support each other, and you connected genuinely because you like and value and respect each other. So I think, you know, those environments where you get connected, but then finding your tribe and then leaning on your tribe to support each other is also a helpful thing.
I know a friend who lived in San Francisco, but then like he introduced me to Martinez, to his home, and then in his home, it's a big home in San Francisco, it's an ancient home, but it has 24 founders for 24 companies. They're living together. They have the basement transformed as a gym. They have.
Is there a camera?
And then like there's like kitchen, like there's like so many different things are happening in the same home, and they're just like they're going to work together. They're just like, and then like, you know, like they're ditching into each other's room, you know, having ideas. But then like they said, like it's our job. Like my job is very lonely. I'm just sitting all the time writing email to investors, and so I just need other people who can understand what I'm going through. And so apparently it's but I was just kind of pretty like it looked like a residential kind of like, you know, founders building, but it's kind of a different model. And I think working in a startup, I recognize as well the challenges of, you know, building a reputation to give you the money and you know, the investment to get into a successful. If you don't have a shining star idea that will just like from the moment it's launched, it's going to attract attention, then you need to build your reputation and prove your solution is really worthwhile investing, and that's not easy. So I think it's another component of how do you stay in for the long game, and how you you know, when do you rush between understanding a decision when to make an exit versus when it's to keep investing and trying to kind of grow and solve for solutions. I think something I have seen on the hardware industry side is that people don't rush into building new ventures, but people understand the whole pipeline, the gaps, and they try to go for where they will fill the gaps, because they know they have a hard chance of being acquired by a bigger company. But I don't think in healthcare, like there is an advantage for both spreading ideas quickly, but also recognizing that many of those will go away and only few will stay. And so do we have the right group of people, from VCs, from mentors, from academics, from physicians, from people to kind of like mentor the new generation of young founders? I think that's a model really worth thinking of.
So may I ask the three of you, you were talking about mentorship and leveraging knowledge and the almost infinite array of possibilities that this technology open for all of us, right? At a collective and at an individual level. May I ask the three of you to think about things that you would like to see in 5 and 15 years time from now that would constitute, that would mean for you we have succeeded in understanding AI as a catalyst, and things that will constitute for you a failure, things you wouldn't like to see in 5, 15 times that would definitely speak to you, yeah, we have failed. And in that case, how do you think we all can work towards the right side?
So what we'd like to see is more instances of MIT critical data around the world. So as I said, we have hundreds of students from across ages, from high school all the way to professors, and they're all involved in projects. And the mentoring that we promote is peer-to-peer mentoring. I always tell students that I don't have the bandwidth for one-on-one mentoring, unfortunately. But what I would like to see is for them to be immersed in groups, hopefully large groups, not small groups too, where they're all teaching each other and learning from each other. What would failure look like, I think I can reference Mimic. I see Mimic as a failure because when we launched Mimic 15 years ago, we thought that in 15 years there will be hundreds of Mimics. And there is really no other Mimic still. So somehow our messaging wasn't effective. And we did not approach it in a manner that will move the needle. We did not move any, well, I guess we do have some data sets from Brazil, so very limited though. The success rate, I think, was very, very narrow. And I consider that as failure on our part, that we didn't do enough to convince people that the only way for AI to advance is through data sharing, because what we have learned with Mimic is that we don't understand how complex the data is. It's not just, so again, I've been critical of fairness metrics, as if fairness metrics will fix all the upstream issues of how we deliver care and how we collect data and who do we collect data from and how do we create the hardware that actually measures the signal. Those are all problematic, and they're all baked into your algorithms. And when there's no data sharing, there's no way for you to discover that. So I remember I was at the APHP, which is a consortium of 38 hospitals in Paris. And I said, I'm tired of giving a keynote, because every time I say you need to share data, and here I am, nothing has changed. And I do that in Germany, I do that in Singapore. So I don't know what should I be trying to convince them that there's no other way. Like, you can invest millions and billions, and monetizing data to me sounds stupid because the data cannot be monetized without the curation part. And the curation requires a whole community, thousands, even tens of thousands of pairs of eyes looking at the data from different angles. So the idea that you can actually make money out of the data, to me, it's just ignorant.
I was gonna say that I would consider Mimic as a success factor, not as a failure factor, because without Mimic, there wouldn't have been any launchpad for many people, young students, and other universities to understand the complexity of the data. I started my ML journey when Mimic was released, and throughout the process, it served as actually an activation model for Stanford and others to release data. So there's some, but also there's the undeniable factor that releasing healthcare data is something that required to go through privacy, security, and data curation, and data cleaning, and de-identification, which is expensive, which no hospital or health system would want. You know, very few of them are likely to put money in. And we did a study actually on organizational readiness for data sharing, and the main factors is hospitals would say, I'm not an academic, my role is to make money off the service I'm providing to patients. Who is going to do that type of service unless they are a nonprofit like Dandelion or Nightingale? The other component is to think of data sharing as, like NIH has, for example, for people who are doing cancer biology research to share because they're funded. These are models that enable data sharing. But I guess the question becomes, there's no free lunch. Like, if we want to promote data sharing, there needs to be a way of how we're going to support the cost for curation, because it doesn't seem that institutions are willing to bear that cost of curating the data. So it serves also to mean that what we have learned from this whole research and the challenge of sharing data, it's also organization challenge, and it's also us needing to come with solutions and how we can solve on the barriers that these institutions see as barriers to releasing data out.
I guess for me, I'd love to see the monetization of data. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not an expert in healthcare, so I don't want to masquerade as in I have any of these great visions on 5 years what it should look like. That's just not within my capabilities. one thing that I do believe, though, and that I would love to see is just, it continues to amaze me that for all of the access capabilities in this country, we have such an unhealthy population due to many choices that I think people are making without the knowledge of what those choices are doing to them and how it's impacting them. And so I would love to me, like, to be able to change habits within people. Somehow how that gets done, I have no idea, but I would love to see that mindset where, you know, as a population, we are able to make those decisions that lead to a better quality of life. So, you know, and then failure is the status quo, right? Like if we only get in worse health and you know, have higher obesity rates and more sedentary lifestyle, like that's, you know, certainly one downside of AI and VR and all these other things that tend to, you know, keep you focused on a screen instead of actually getting out in the world and enjoying it. So maybe there's a hybrid approach that gets us more active and then also helps us make those decisions that lead to a better quality of life.
No, I was gonna point to her.
This is just spitballing. I don't know if this has been tried before, but is there, obviously it's difficult to get data out of hospitals. I wonder if we could talk to patients directly to have people give their medical records. Because especially if you have like maybe a rare disease, you had a really difficult time getting diagnosed, maybe the treatments for your disease are not awesome and you know, want to contribute to a cure or to better treatments, like if patients would be willing to give up their data. And it wouldn't be the same as saying like, all right, well we have a hospital population, we have everyone, so we know that our distribution is going to fit the distribution of like this other hospital where the patients are similar. But at the same time, if data sharing is such an issue from like a hospital perspective, but patients do have like a, you know, if the research advances, then patients in the future can benefit. People might be willing to share. I don't really know what shape that would take or how you collect their data.
So can I ask a question? Because initially, one of the core, like data is still crucial and very important. But initially, we were building models, and large language models and generative models were not in the picture of most of the models we were building were prediction models. Still super important to understand the data. But how would we characterize the change of how powerful model exists and the smaller sampler of data that we need? And then like, who maintains the data? Like the data cannot be just data that is handed in to someone, and if a patient hands this data or wants an entity to benefit from it to build a cure, that data is supposed to be serving the public. So it's supposed to be serving in a place where others can also benefit. So
One model for that sort of bridges this is what they did at the Wellcome Trust. Right? So when we first started doing whole genome sequencing, it was so expensive that we could only do a certain number of them, and then eventually more and more data came out. But there was a while where there was data that was really hard to come by. Nobody really knew what to do with it, but we knew we wanted to get all the minds of the earth sort of working on it. So the Wellcome Trust established this data center, essentially, and you could pitch an idea to them. And they were a committee of people to include patients and scientists and everybody else. And if they were like, yeah, that's a great idea, then they would grant you access to their centrally stored database, and you'd be able to run your questions against it. So I wonder if there's a version like that, right? As we're creating all this really rich database, that we can create a public good, which is a public data thing that has an API, essentially, that's controlled by committee, for lack of a better way to describe it, right? To include marginalized populations and patients and doctors and everybody else, sort of who are the stakeholders at the table. It's like the IRB on steroids.
But research after research show that patients are willing to share the data. Every time you survey them, like if it's going to help society understand the disease, please take my data. So there's this really, I don't know, myth that patients are scared to share the data when in fact they're sharing everything else already. So why not share your health data? And again, it's being shared as we speak anyway, behind the doors. So, and I don't want, so I'm a big critique of the idea of giving the patients the ownership because
we don't have the information.
we don't have equal agency to negotiate where your data goes to. We don't have, a lot of people don't have the time to even think about this. Like homeless people, like come on, are you gonna say, okay, we're gonna give you this thumb drive, and you keep it there. So to me, this is public good. So the understanding should be there's a community that is in charge of the data. And it's funny because when you talk to indigenous people, they say that there's no such thing as individual privacy. There's community privacy, but not individual privacy. So, and even consent, like our understanding of consent is so Western. And it's not even informed consent. Like, come on, who are you fooling? Oh, we have informed consent. Like, bullshit. Like, who are they to say no when you're taking care of the patient, right? So again, this is the time to question everything we've embraced. And to me, this is the legacy of AI.
And I think one additional point is the power always of the data is not in the individual rows or in the individual patient file. Yes, it is in the collective and the volume of data, because these models would not have signal if they don't see a large quantity of data. But I'm going back to your point on what I see in 5 years. I think I would like to see more young founders who are solving real world problems because they have the experience of experiencing those problems and trying to find another way to solve for it without the bureaucracy of systems, and trying to get into innovative ways that really transform how investors and how people think and support these solutions. I would like to see more transparency in what fails of these technology, and how can we acknowledge the fairness, fairness, and then just like how do we learn from those lessons. And then like I would like to see a dismantle of the governance model to be a model that is really built on people's safety with using AI, rather than being a checklist for compliance or just like something that people want to stay away from any solutions that have regulatory guidance to it because they just don't know how to navigate it. So, yeah.
Any final words before we wrap up? So with that, we'd love to see you again tomorrow. The workshops are going to be completely different. They're more AI related. So I will describe the 3 workshops. One is HASTE workshop. HASTE is HASTC, Health AI Systems Thinking for Community. It used to be for equity. We replaced the equity with community. And the idea there is we need to keep up with the papers that are coming out. So you're not going to learn health AI in your classrooms because there are 10 to 12 papers that are coming out every week. No professor would be able to keep up. So what we do in these events is that we form teams with very different epistemologies. We give them recent papers. They imagine what are the worst possible scenarios that could happen. And I'll give you one that I think we used this paper in Uganda, and it's a paper that could infer whether you're gay or straight. And it was an algorithm that came out of Stanford. And they trained the algorithm on face photos from dating sites. So there's a label of gay or straight. And of course it was very accurate. And the Ugandan students like, what the fuck were they thinking? Where were the teachers? Why did they tell them not to create this model? And then more importantly, you need to come up with guardrails, not necessarily government regulations, but what are some of the guardrails that we could erect to prevent those nightmare scenarios? So that's the HASTE workshop. The second one is LLM-a-thon. And to me, we need to be having an LLM-a-thon every day. And this is evaluating models not based on the benchmarks coming from OpenAI or Anthropic, but coming from the people who will be harmed by these models. So for example, we have one in Canada where we're inviting patients with depression and anxiety disorders from different age groups because they will have a different set of metrics, whether you're a teenager or young adults or older adults. And we want them to come up with a report card of what do you think is important when you're interacting apart from accuracy. And then of course we plug social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists into each team. So we think that these benchmarks have to be very specific. None of this, it passed the USMLE. Come on. I'm going to shoot the next paper that says that it passed the USMLE with 97%. It doesn't mean shit, like seriously. the benchmarks have to be relevant to the conditions, the patients. And then the last one I think is the most fun, and I'm gonna have, maybe Mena, you could explain the art as healing workshop better.
Oh, wow. So this is a workshop, Art as Healing, that took place in January of
Yep.
this year, where we brought together artists, musicians, philosophers,
Nuns and priests
nuns,
and rabbis.
and it was, and indigenous healers, and started to kind of reimagine and reinvigorate what what medical education could be, or what the clinical encounter, what is medicine, what is healing, what could that look like, kind of bringing in these different epistemologies. And it was one of those, you walked away kind of high, tingling, we're just blowing things up anyway, right? But what came of that, I mean, it sounds like, okay, did anything actually happen? Well, a ton of stuff happened. After that, the kinds of connections and not just, yeah, sure, papers written, but relationships that were formed. I think probably companies started from that. Organizations in different countries. It just, once again, when I think when we are able to show up as our whole selves with others who have also permission to show up as their whole selves, the kind of deep and rich connections are so much more than when we're limited to being researcher, engineer, artist alone, technician alone. We actually start to function within community, and when we're able to be our whole self. So that was the first time, like, I'm walking into a room with nuns, with educators, with engineers, with there were some BC folks there too. I mean, it was wild. And what came of it was also, I would say,
There was an
wild.
ex-NFL
True.
yes, in there too. So please do come. It's going to be at the Sri Ram School of Bioengineering and Chemical Engineering within Stanford. And bring your friends, bring your families, bring your kids, bring your grandparents, because this is fun. And we do this again around the world, and you could see all the blogs that they put on social media. So I'm hoping that this spills over to everything that they do on a day-to-day. And it's gonna be hard to actually measure whether these events have been successful, because we don't have the metrics yet to demonstrate that these activities are of value. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow.